Hi and welcome to Page Hall Festival. My name is Samaya Wright and I am an artist based in Sheffield. I have a personal history with Page Hall. I used to live in Firth Park as a child and I visited Page Hall Road frequently as I was growing up. And seeing all the pictures and things that have resurfaced from Page Hall has kind of brought back a lot of memories for me. And I recently worked there in the past couple of years with Ignite Imaginations as well. So I know the community, I know the people that live there, and for myself, I wanted to volunteer so that I could kind of give back to this community and also show off its diversity, as I see that as a positive thing. So to begin with, I wanted to just talk about how I found the patterns and the history. And these patterns are important because today we're going to be doing a workshop in making bunting, which is going to be a part of the festival and on their website. And there'll be more information about that below. And I'll talk about that more later as well. So to begin with, I found out about these patterns mainly through my own experience. So I have been doing patterns as part of my artwork for a while now. And I was trying to consider what are one of the ways I could show the similarities between very different and diverse cultures of people. And one of the things that came to mind was patterns. Patterns are universal. You see them all over the world. They can be used to determine age, marital status. They can form their own language, or they could simply just be a form of expression and individuality. And by looking at the pattern work, I found a similarity between, for example, Slovakian patterns and patterns you'd find in henna. So as an experiment, I decided to take a traditional style you would see in colour scheme you would find in Slovakian style of art and transfer that into a piece that would look like henna. So let me show you. This, if you can see it, is basically a drawing where this is a henna pattern that I have then transformed to make it look more Slovakian, for example, more European, and the colours as well was something that I found tends to be primarily primary colours and makes it really vibrant and really beautiful looking. I also showed this to a friend of mine who just so happens to be Pakistani, and immediately she saw it to be henna. But this, as you can see, is just one way in which you can form patterns from your own culture and your own cultural background, but also as a way to learn more about different cultures and to experience a new culture and a new style of art that you might not have considered before. I am English Pakistani, so for me, I wanted to incorporate my love for flowers, which you're going to see a lot of throughout this project. A lot to do around the shape of a heart, because love is a central theme in my artwork. And the heart as a pattern is synonymous with the idea of love. And there's so many different ways of drawing it as well. It doesn't have to just be one way. This that you saw is just one way of doing it. Most traditionally, people tend to do the lines, but I've also broken it down into more geometric shape, which again transforms the idea of what the heart shape can be and can hopefully give you guys some inspiration of what you could do. So I'm moving on to the next page, and here we have this drawing here, and this was my way of again working with this geometric heart shape but making it a little bit simpler. I also wanted to look at the history of flowers, and I looked at the national flowers of different countries around the world. I decided to focus on ones from the people in Page Hall, and one of the main communities and, you know, members of the community that I've come across tends to be, you know, people from Europe, the Asian community, for example, being Bangladeshi, Pakistani, Indian, and of course, English. So you see here all these different flowers. We have this flower here, which is representative of those from Pakistan. We also have these flowers here and here, which are roses and different flowers that you would find in Slovakia and Romania. And then, of course, we have the Yorkshire rose, which is synonymous with Yorkshire. Another question as well that came to mind is, you know, what is the history behind these patterns and why would anyone be interested in learning about them? I think it's important to remember that if you are looking into patterns, the best place to start is with yourself and your own cultural background, and think about where you might find patterns in your own history. So this again was one example. Now I'm going to go into another, and it starts to get a little bit more complicated, but also a little bit more fun. So this was my example of what I would do if I was going to create a pattern that represented myself. So the other two you saw were kind of doing something similar, but obviously I was including other cultures outside of my own cultural upbringing. So I decided to focus on the two cultures that I have been raised in. And for me, as I said before, that is English Pakistani. Moving on to a second example, again representing my own cultural upbringing. So for this one, I decided to do another style of the Yorkshire rose. You'll see that I tend to draw them more naturally, and that is just my own personal preference. You could do them in a more geometric form, or you could decide you don't want to draw a flower at all and instead you want to draw a very different pattern. That is totally fine and acceptable. But I've stuck with the Yorkshire rose because it's so synonymous with my culture, being from the north, being English. And it's something that when you see, you instantly recognize to be from Yorkshire. But I decided to draw it in a style, again, like henna and mehndi, because the thing with being mixed race is that I am neither one nor the other. At any point in time, I will always be both. So, for example, even though I might look more Pakistani to some people, I am still at the same time English. And if I dress in English wear, as I am today, I'm still Pakistani. So it's this kind of interweaving of two different cultures that I'm representing all the time. In spite how I might be perceived by other people, I get to decide how I want to be perceived, what it is that I want to show more of. So for example, I might decide to look more English, or I might decide to look more Pakistani, or speak, you know, Urdu or English. I don't know that much Urdu. So this is to kind of showcase this, that it is not simply one or the other. I won't be drawing half and half, because that is not how it works as a person. And in terms of DNA and things, they're actually interlinked with one another. And to try and break down what part of me is English and what part of me is Pakistani is almost impossible, because there'll always be that little bit of me that is Pakistani mixed in with being English, and English mixed in with being Pakistani. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you exactly how I got from a blank piece of paper to the finished product here. So we have some pieces of paper. I will be starting with paper today, chosen printing paper because it's the most readily available and most easy to work with, and you'll see how helpful it can be in the near future. The other thing that I need to highlight is that this pattern, as you will see, is a lot bigger than what I will be drawing, and that is because I wanted to make them large enough for you to be able to see them and to give you an idea of the detail that you can go into, or lack of detail if that's what you prefer. But really, this, if you are sticking with A4, this is probably going to be the limitation and the outline that you'll be working with. As you can see, the pattern I showed before will not fit onto here. So that is something to consider if you are going to be cutting your shape out into the bunting triangle shape. You need to make sure that you leave enough room on whatever medium you're working on so that you can draw your pattern and cut out the triangle shape. That's something to consider as well. And the good thing about using printing paper is that it is sheer, so I can see through here. I don't know if it will pick up on the camera, but if you draw a rather thick line, I use black Sharpie for this, and then lay this on top, you can then see through the printing paper to the piece of paper below with the lines on it to help you draw more neatly. You could just go ahead and draw directly onto here. But if you want, for example, all the pieces to look the same, then you might just consider having a template behind, just to give you an idea of the shape and dimension. So I'm going to give you all full disclosure of what I did, okay? Because I always see beautiful videos of geometric patterns and it's just like a line and it's perfectly straight, and I'm just like, that's not real. So what I did is I went to store and I bought a goods and guides paper, and it was just something I found in David Smith. You probably find one online, but it gave me access to different lines of paper that I wouldn't normally have access to. It also reminded me a lot of my time at school when I was doing physics. You guys will know what I'm talking about, the blue lines, or for example, like maths books as well. So if you have them, just use that paper. But really what it did is it helped give me a ready-made structure so that I don't have to worry about trying to make the lines look symmetrical, make them look straight or neat. So if I turn to the first page, I have a lot to show you. So this was my very first attempt at doing the drawing, and as you can see, it is rather complicated. So if I just fold it up for you to have a look at, that is actually quite a complicated drawing, and yet all it is lines. And what I did was just simply take my ruler. I also used a pencil, and I just used the lines already on the lined paper as a guide to help me draw. It did take a few attempts and it took quite a bit of time. But this was my first attempt at trying to make this pattern in a new style. I had never drawn like this before. Usually I would have just purely gone in freehand and used the lines, but instead I decided I wanted to draw in a geometric form. And you can start to see here, I already decided I was not going to do it exactly symmetrical. And that I think is really important to remember. It's okay if, for example, you make a mistake and you decide, actually, you know what, I'm just going to go with the flow and let it be. Or if you do want it to be perfect, you can always rub it out and try again. So I would go light. Always begin with a pencil, unless you're a daredevil. And that way, if you make any mistakes, you can erase it and try it again. Once I had done the pattern on the lined paper and I was happy with it, I then got good old-fashioned tracing paper, laid it on and traced over it. But because one side is not symmetrical and it is thicker than the other, I then had to flip the tracing paper around and go over it one more time before it was then ready for me to put on a fresh piece of paper and trace again. So I'm going to reiterate this a lot. It takes time if you want to do it like this. That is something that you need to remember. This might not be done in a day. It could be over a few days. Or if you do have time, it could just be something you're doing maybe on a lazy Sunday afternoon, maybe when you're watching television. This could be something that you do absent-mindedly, unless you want to sit for 5 hours and just go through the whole process in one go. It's an option as well. But by doing this format was actually the quickest way, because if I had gone in freehand, I probably would have made more mistakes. I wouldn't have got it so straight and neat the way I wanted it to be. So this was actually the quickest way I found. If you do find a faster way, please let me know. And I know another form is to go digital and to do it online. That is another option. So if you are adept at using, CorelDRAW or Photoshop or illustration, for example, you could probably, run this whole pattern out in like under 5 minutes. We're not all like that. So I like to draw using my hands, on paper first, rather than doing it over the internet and over the computer. So this is the way I chose to do it. So then I traced this directly onto a new fresh piece of paper. And that was simply because I wasn't going to make the bunting out of the lined paper I just showed you. I wanted it to be on a new fresh piece of paper, so that if I did want to cut it out, for example, I could immediately do that, or I could already have a piece of bunting paper ready and cut out, and I can just place this on top and trace it out, ready to then go over it in color using felt tip. You will need to leave space at the top for the string or ribbon to go on so that you can hang your bunting in the air. You could just cut out the bunting as it is and use something like glue tack, but it's not that great for the walls. Unless you're sticking it to the window maybe, then it's a little bit easier to take off. So I would suggest you take a ruler and you go up into about like a centimeter higher, just straight up into the air. I will bring it up to the camera so you can see what I've done. So if I just show this now, I've got these lines that are just going straight up into the air. And that's the rest of my pattern and the triangular shape. So now that I have the overall pattern that I'm going to be working with, the next thing to consider is, what do I want to put in it? What do I want to showcase? And I have already shown you 2 different versions of myself, or a part of who I am, which either to my cultures. But for this one, I decided, actually it would be a good idea to show you an example of the things that I like to do as a person. And this again is to give hopefully some inspiration to those of you who maybe don't know that much about your culture, or you do, but you just don't want to discuss it. And instead you just want to discuss the things that you like. So the first thing I will be showing is that I do have a love for animals, particularly birds and cats and things. So I'm just going to draw a very, very loose attempt at a cat. It's like a witchy cat, this one. But I'm not going to do, have it be really perfect or anything, because I'm not interested in doing that. I'm just drawing the essence of it. The other thing as well could be drawing birds. So I'm not ashamed to say, as an artist myself, I tend to go online and look at images, whether I'm looking at images of birds or flowers, so that I have a reference. It's actually quite difficult to draw from memory. I know some people can do it and it's a gift, but if you're new at drawing, I would suggest just looking online. Some people look at YouTube tutorials. Some of you guys, this could be your very first attempt at drawing. So it's okay if the first time you draw something, you're like, that doesn't really look how I want it to look. It is with pencil, so you can always, rub it out and try again. That is totally fine. The other thing as well to consider is, that you will be going over it potentially in another medium, whether it's paint, like acrylic or pencil or crayon or gel pens, whatever. So it's okay if you're making a couple mistakes now, because we can erase them later anyway. So the other thing as well about myself is, like I said, I do love birds. So I might include a bird. So I think I'm going to include the peacock, because I learned how to do a peacock. A lot of the time when what you see in a finished project that an artist has drawn isn't exactly how they started out. They started out with so much so much less than what you thought, and then they show you the finished product and you're like, wow, it's amazing, and you didn't see how long it took. You didn't see the mistakes that they made before finally they were able to get it right and have the courage to show you on the internet. Because a lot of the time, no one can draw perfectly immediately. It takes a lot of confidence to do that, and a lot of time as well, and energy to do that. And if you don't have that time, you could be sitting there thinking, gosh, how am I supposed to draw this really beautiful pattern when it's taking so long? But the thing is that the best works of art I've seen take time. It's a cliche, but when they say Rome wasn't built in a day, they meant it. And right now I'm making this peacock, and I'm just considering the essence of a peacock and what I need to include that would make it look like one. Because you have to remember, this is not a peacock, this is a drawing of a peacock, so it's not going to be perfect the way you would expect it to if I was, for example, taking a photograph of one. And that's something else people kind of forget, that you're drawing a pattern, you're not drawing the actual thing. You could draw, a very detailed ornate version of a lion, for example, if you really like lions, but it's still a drawing of a lion, it's not a lion. So I really wouldn't matter or stress too much about it doesn't look exactly like a lion, because it doesn't matter, it's your lion. You can do whatever you want. So there. And again, I'm just making random lines here for the peacock. I do like a whole lesson in how to draw just with lines, but I'm not going to, because that's for another day. And again, remember, This is my drawing of the things that I like. I happen to like color a lot, so the idea of a peacock as well, it's literally two birds with one stone, because I love using color. Peacocks are colorful, and I love birds. Peacocks are birds, so it's perfect. But this is a very different drawing to the ones that I've shown you, because this is me, again, not planning, just kind of going with it, and I'm not using the internet, so it's not going to look super clean and fresh. I'm going to add some detail. I would say if you are going to add detail to one part of the pattern, make sure you balance it out and add detail elsewhere, because otherwise it can kind of look weighted down on one side compared to the other. And, you know, if you're perhaps a parent and you're working with your kids, you know that your kids are just going to go wild and draw whatever the hell they want, and you got to let them do it, and that's kind of the point, you know. And they're not really thinking too much about how perfect the lines look. And I think the older we get, the more fixated we become on trying to make something look perfect. It ain't perfect. So for this one, what I'm going to do is actually go through this and show you exactly how I was able to create this. So again, getting on some tape, I would mark out the overall main shapes, but I stick with one direction of drawing the lines. So for example, if I'm going to draw this shape, I'm only going to do the lines going across. And then when I'm ready, I will turn my ruler around and I will start to do the lines going down. And that way you don't forget which lines you've drawn and which ones you haven't drawn, and you're constantly having to check. And now I'm going to add some colors. So for this pattern, I'm just going to do one color, because I found that it was a lot easier. Now, you can use the ruler, or you can just go in at this point and just start to draw. If you have a felt pen, felt tip one like this, you know, you might find that the color bleeds and it kind of diffuses through the paper and becomes a little bit fatter. And then these really nice delicate lines that you've been drawing suddenly disappear. So that is something to consider. Test out, you know, the pens that you're using to see how they behave before you apply them to your piece of paper. Because the last thing you want is for you to create a really ornate and delicate pattern for it to just completely disappear because your medium, you know, like for example these, it's just completely causing anything delicate to just disappear, and then all that time and effort that you put into creating something beautiful is just gone. So this is the finished product. As you can see, it's not exactly like what I drew, because I did decide to just do my own thing and not take it too personally. If you find that is the case, you know, that's great. If you might be horrified that I did not follow the lines, I am sorry. That is kind of what makes this its own. Now, if I had wanted to make the lines really fine, you can get some really fine tip pens, and they can give so much more intricate detail. It was how I was able to create this original pattern here. You know, I was able to get that through using those really fine felt tips. But you know, looking at the difference already just by using a thicker line The good thing about using thicker lines is you can hide your mistakes and make it seem more deliberate, but of course it will erase any detail that you were trying to capture. So that is something to consider. The colors as well are really vibrant, and that again is going to change your view of it. So you don't have to do this, but I will be adding into the center. Oh. Just to show you close, that's what I created. So now that we've finished doing all the drawings, the last thing to do now is just to cut them out. And to do that, of course, you're going to need a pair of scissors, or you could potentially use a blade. But if you are going to do that, you will need parental supervision and mats as well if you are going to do some finer cutting. But I always find a pair of scissors is easier and safer every time. Now we have the fun part. So you've finished, all of it is fun. So you have finished your bunting, and now you can decide what order would you like to put them in. If, like me, you have bunting of different sizes, then it would probably be best to alternate between big and small. And that way the weight would be evenly distributed and it won't end up looking lopsided, for example. So because I cut them all to the same size at the top, they should all be able to hang neatly side by side. So what you want to do is turn them around, and you can use glue or you can use tape. It is totally up to yourself. Once you're happy with the order and the layout of them, you're going to want to take a ruler. You don't need to use a ruler if you don't want to. You could just do it with your fingers. And you're going to take the bunting, turn it around, and you see where the line that you drew at the top is. You're going to fold it back and then press down. And just try to have a look and make sure that you have pressed down at the line, and that's where your crease is. Doesn't have to be perfect, but you want to try and make it as neat as possible. This is what it looks like on the side. And now we're going to take our string. So this is a ball of yarn or string that I bought from the post office. And it's fairly cheap to buy and purchase. You don't need to go online. You can just go to your local post office and you'll find this. And then you can decide how spaced apart you want your bunting to be. So for example, do you want the bunting to be side by side? Do you want to have a gap between them? And you need to make sure you leave enough room on either end so that you can hook this and hang it on something if you choose. What I would recommend doing is forming a loop. So you take the end of the string and make a loop like this. So it's kind of like a teardrop. Holding with your forefingers and thumb the hoop, you're kind of pinching it. So you pinch the end of the string and you pinch the loop. You wrap it around your finger and then pull the loop off your finger, take the end of the loop and feed it through and pull. And this will give you a small loop. And I'm going to use tape, but you can use glue. I do recommend using tape just to seal it down, but again, you could use glue, and I'm thinking PVA glue more than using Pritt stick glue. But you can try either and see what works. You're then going to fold the piece of paper, little tab over, and then using your tape or glue, tape it down like that. Of course, we don't want any of it to show through, so I will get some more tape and tape it. And this is a really neat way of being able to string your bunting without it being seen. So if I bring it up for you to see, that's what it looks like. This is what it looks like from the front. And because it's paper and it's fairly light, it's not going to really show. Now, with your string, you're going to get your ruler and line it up with the edge of the paper. Make sure your string is tight. So you just hold it down, pull the string gently, and just look. So I think I want to have a gap of about 1 inch. And I'm just going to mark that. And again, you don't have to be this precise if you don't want to. It is completely up to you. But if you do want it to be a little bit neater, so now I'm going to take my bunting, line it up with the orange dot I just marked, and then lay my string down nice and flat inside and nice and straight too. And then repeat the process again. And now, here is your bunting. Now, again, if say you do not have access to paper, pencils, or materials, or that's just not something you're comfortable with doing, if drawing, painting, none of it is your style, the last thing I would recommend is to consider perhaps the things that you're interested in. So for example, if you're really into baking, I would then recommend you perhaps were to collect all the equipment that you would use, or for example, like all the cakes or muffins, etc., that you would bake, and arrange them on your kitchen table into the shape of bunting, and take a photo of that and send that to us. And that is another way in which you could potentially do this project. I hope that this has been helpful and inspired you to start creating your own work. And I'm really excited, and I look forward to see what it is that you create. And remember, this project is purely personal. It's to reflect who you are as an individual, to also perhaps reflect your cultural upbringing and heritage, and to just let loose and have a little bit of fun, experimenting with different materials, maybe doing some research into some other neighboring cultures that you might not have explored before, to see their art style in color scheme and patterns, and just see what you create. So I look forward to seeing what all of you guys create on Page Hall Festival website, and I wish you well and good luck. Take care. Bye.